What's going on, guys? Today's video is going to be a layer breakdown of my newest Terminator piece. I'm going to show you how I went from this to this. So this was my first time doing a 3-panel piece. My canvas was 6,750 pixels wide by 2,813 pixels tall. I normally like to stick to a 4:5 ratio for Instagram, but I felt this piece just needed a bit more of a panoramic feel. It had 165 layers and 28 groups. Anyway, let's dive into how this came together. Step 1 was to roughly block out the scene. I knew I wanted an ominous sky, a big pile of debris, some kind of man-made object that's been destroyed, a few T-800 endoskeletons, and some Hunter airships. The corners were feeling a bit empty, so I figured, what better way to fill those in than with some explosions? Don't worry, we'll fix those colors later. I wanted the sky to be brighter so the T-800s would be easier to see. So I used a brightness and contrast layer to brighten up the sky and clarity within Camera Raw to give it some more texture. Our main rock pile needed some adjustments, so I added curves, selective color, and levels to darken, change the color, and remove some of the black. Okay, like I said, we were going to fix these side explosions. I added vibrance and hue and saturation to remove the color and darken them up. I also added a path blur to give them some movement. I wanted to add some separation between the rock pile and the explosions. You know, give it some depth and distance. So I painted some smoke in using dust brushes. I did this in 3 layers, all with different colors, just to give it some texture. I knew the piece needed fire, so I added in a bunch of images of fire. I put them into screen mode and used selective color to get them all to the same tone. Next, I needed a bit more separation between the main T-800 and the background. So I used my dust brush again and painted a subtle layer with a light gray color behind it, just to make him stand out a bit more. Something was still missing though. Ah, yes, human skulls. I used a 3D skull object I found online, rotated it to the angles I needed, and placed them throughout the canvas. They needed some color correction in shadows, so I used a soft brush, set it to black, but shrunk the height of it so I had a very narrow oblong brush shape, and then painted in the shadows. Then I hit the skulls with curves, hue and saturation, and levels to remove some black, darken them, and shift the tones to gray. I added one more layer of debris into the background using some brushes, and then it was time to get to the lighting work. First things first, these rocks needed to be illuminated from the fire. So I used a soft brush, put my layer into overlay mode, and painted around the surrounding areas to get some light fall off. I then used a smaller, brighter brush in normal mode and started painting along the edges of certain rocks, just as catch lights. Lastly, I painted in overlay mode over the areas of the skulls to hit them with some of the light as well. Now, for the Hunter ships, I added brightness and contrast and levels to flatten them out a bit, and then used a soft round brush to lighten up the rims of them. And then lastly, drop their opacity to about 60 or 70% just to make them blend in with the sky more. Oh yeah, I lightly painted in some smoke trails. I'm not even sure if that's where the smoke comes out from these ships, but I don't really care. The helicopter needed some dimension, so using 2 separate exposure layers, I darkened the side facing us, then used a soft white brush to light the top portion to match the scene. Okay, it was time to make these T-800s pop a bit. I added curves and levels to darken the one in the back and remove some black. I then used a mask in overlay mode to paint in some orange glow from the fire, and then use a soft white brush along the top left to match the light source. Oh yeah, I also turned on that one fire layer I missed earlier. Now for the one in the back right. It needed to be darkened on the right, but also had some black levels and blue that needed to be removed. So I added exposure, 2 different curve layers, and hue and saturation. Then for the highlights, I did the exact same thing as before. Painted the orange glow in overlay mode, and then used a soft white brush for the top left area. For the center Terminator, I did the same thing. Levels and curves to crush the blacks and darken the right side. Then I painted the orange glow on an overlay layer and the whites with a soft white brush. I used some solid layers in linear dodge mode as well as some screen layers to make the eyes of the T-800s glow red. For some final touches, I wanted some sparks in the scene, and also wanted the fire to glow a bit more. So I dropped in some sparks, put them into screen mode, and then made a new layer, filled it with black, set it to linear dodge, and then painted over the fire just a bit to make it pop more. I also added one more smoke trail in the back. Finally, it was time for my favorite part, Camera Raw. I knew I wanted it to have more contrast and to punch up the blues and oranges. I added some noise, crushed the blacks a bit, the list goes on. I honestly usually just mess around with the sliders until I get my desired look. And there you have it. That's how I made this Terminator piece. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you liked the video and want to see more breakdowns, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you in my next video.